you're very good at this. You write about the near future, then the future happens. Thankfully, and especially for my friend Franco, the owner of Cafe Milano, that was averted. And so we'll just go back. You had a scene where the cafe.
Tell you the funniest thing about Cafe Milano?
Yeah, please.
Every time we go there, the first question that Laurent asks us, the very famous maitre d' of Cafe Milano, is, would we like to sit in the blast zone or not in the blast zone?
Right, exactly. So for my viewers and listeners, what Daniel's referring to is there's a scene in one of the Elan books where there's a bomb that goes off. A terrorist has planted a bomb. Cafe Milano is one of the more Tony restaurants in D.C., and it's well visited by the nation's leaders, cabinet members, presidents, etc. Bomb goes off in the restaurant, and obviously people are hurt. Gabriel Elan himself is wounded in that attack. And then coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, because this is part of your genius, we have a situation where a terrorist, I think it was an Iranian terrorist, was about to blow up the restaurant, and it was averted. And so some people have said to me that a lot of people in the intelligence arena are reading your books, and you were predicting something that was about to happen, and in a weird way, you possibly helped them prevent it from happening. But now we got this unique situation. I don't want to give up this book, The Collector. I thought it was a virtuoso of yours. I thought it was a total masterpiece. I don't want to give up the book, but there is a plot line that I do want to discuss without giving up too much detail. If there was a bomb to go off in the Ukraine, a nuclear bomb, of course, the Russians would want that to appear like a false flag situation, that it wasn't in fact them. And so they would have to find fissile material from another part of the world that couldn't be traced back to them. And therefore, that's part of the plot line that Gabriel and his cohorts are working on. One, had you come up with that plot line? Give us a little bit of let us get into your inner sanctum, if you don't mind, and tell us about how your characters are evolving over the course of this series.
Well, let's go to the plot line first. You remember last October, November, we became alarmed, and I think that's the right word, alarmed by the kinds of statements that Putin was making, not only Putin, but the people around him and his propagandists on Russian television. I mean, daily warnings that Russia was going to use nuclear weapons if it felt it needed to. It was just a drumbeat of very loose nuclear talk coming out of Moscow. But I think more alarmingly, we were picking up signs that the Russians were really casting about for an excuse, a pretext to use nuclear weapons, and that they were trying to perhaps create a dirty bomb, not a actual detonatable bomb, but a dirty bomb, a radiological dispersion device, and that they were looking for perhaps material from a Ukrainian nuclear power plant or something that they could then create, have a dirty bomb attack, then use that as a pretext to launch their own tactical weapons. And we were so alarmed by this that President Biden took the extraordinary step, and I don't think we can understate how extraordinary it was, of publicly warning Vladimir Putin, do not use nuclear weapons or a dirty bomb in Ukraine, that it will be catastrophic. And there's a lot of happy talk during that period from people. Well, he's a rational actor. He would never do it. This is, gamesmanship on his part. But behind the scenes at the White House, CIA, the Pentagon, we were table-topping this, Anthony. We were worried that something was going to happen. So my novel is set during that period. It is sort of an alternative history, if you will, of that, a hidden alternative history of that period. And for a dirty bomb or a false flag nuclear attack to have any, and I stress that word, any credibility, the fissile material could not come from Russia's nuclear stockpile, because we could, in very short order, by testing the radiological fallout, we can determine the provenance of that material. So that's what the plot is about.
So does your wife Jamie ever get jealous of all these beautiful women that you create in these novels? I mean, we're now dealing with Ingrid Johansson.
No,
she's okay with it, right?
No.
She's okay with these.
These okay. I love pairing Gabriel with a good commercial, beautiful woman at his side, and I think that the character that I created in this novel is one of my favorites that I've done in a very long time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I mean, she is by far, for me, the most I don't want to say the Black Widow, all the different. I don't want to say the most. She's at the top of the list because she's got everything going on, including the environmentalism. So I'm a criminal, but I'm also an environmental. I'm a criminal environmentalist, which I find to be literally very, very.
She was going to be paired with a oil company executive, and so literature is and tension requires conflict. And so we have a radical environmentalist paired with an oil executive to try to save the world, I gave that to her character. But she was a delight to work with. There are a couple of scenes in the novel, with some of the dialogue and exchanges and banter between Gabriel and Ingrid Johansson. I feel some of the best stuff I've ever written.
Yeah.
From the minute she came into the novel, she just sort of jumped off the page. I can't wait to use her again.
Yeah, no, listen, I
love every minute. Ingrid survives the climax of the book.
Yeah, the problem with your novels, unfortunately, is I savor them, and so I don't really want to finish them. I find myself, if I'm in a quiet place, I want to read them, but I don't want to read them if I'm not in a quiet place. But when I finished this novel, I was like, okay, I got to wait another 11, 12 months for the next one. But let me ask you this, because we're both lovers of books. We're both bibliophiles. You have a book collector in the book, The Collector. You picked 3 books: The Great Gatsby, or as you call it, Gatsby; The Beautiful and the Damned. Those are both written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And then Thomas Mann is in the book, The Death of Venice. And so why those 3 books? Or were those just random books out of your brain? Or did you pick those? Were there symbolism in those 3 books as it related to this book?
Well, anyone who's read my book, and my books, I should say, knows that I have all sorts of Gatsby allusions all through them. I'm a F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yep.
He's a huge influence on my writing and my style. I mean, I cannot write like F. Scott Fitzgerald, obviously, but I just adore Fitzgerald. Beautiful and Damned. I mean, there's obvious allusions in the novel.
Sure.
To that choice.
Well, Gabriel says more than once, which one are you? Are you the beautiful, or are you the damned? Yep.
Which one are you damned for because of what you have done? And the book, compromat, Russia's use of compromat, to compromise and turn people from law-abiding, decent people into their assets, how ruthlessly they wield compromat, how the entire Systema, as they call it in Russia, is based on compromat. That anyone who is in the inner circle or making money in Russia is compromised in a very real sense by their participation in the system. And so compromat is very very much at the forefront of the novel, and a major character in the novel, an oil company executive. He's completely compromised by the Russians and does Putin's bidding.
The Fitzgerald references, I may have told you this. I grew up in the town of Port Washington, where Fitzgerald at the tip of the town is what he said was East Egg. It's Sands Point, and West Egg was Kings Point. And so we were forced very early in our lives to read Fitzgerald's works because he was a celebrated figure in our town. He said something I want you to react to. He said that there are no second acts in American life. Did he get that right, Daniel?
Nope. No. He, you know, I think Donald Trump is on about his 18th act or something like
Right,
that.
exactly.
I think that you do. Um, if you have a huge fall, it's difficult to come back from that. I would think in American life. Um, but look, we're a forgiving country. I think still. I hope. He had a you know he wrote Gatsby. It took him a very long time to get tender as the night finished. I mean, it's a combination of about two or three manuscripts. He had all kinds of false starts. He was struggling with drinking, and then he went sort of downhill from there and ended up out in Hollywood. Didn't have the career that he should have had, and maybe he was in a weird way um, foretelling his own future.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing because I often think about it. I'm on my ninth act myself, Daniel. I'm talking to you on the anniversary of my White House press conference. Okay, and so 11 short days later, I was blown from the White House. But yeah, as I tell people, life goes on. You
Lucky.
don't have to take yourself that seriously. But I just find Fitzgerald, for me, like for you, is a very compelling novelist, and he was in touch with a lot of our feelings and emotions. And I think you do that. I think you do that beautifully. I mean, you explain all of our contradictions. So let's talk about this philosopher king, Gabriel Allon.
Okay.
I heard the interview with you and George Stephanopoulos where you talked about Allon being a cold figure in the beginning, and now he's more likable to you. He seems like he's become more of a philosopher king. He's more accepting of human frailty. My grandmother had one of the best lines that I always share with people. The best among us choose not to judge human frailty so harshly. It was sort of she was very Roman Catholic, and her attitude was, we're all frail. Let's take it easy on each other, and not stand on ceremony. So tell me about your friend Gabriel Allon. How has he evolved? And do I have it right? Has he become more of a philosopher? He's more like Solomon now. He has the slingshot of David, but he talks more like Solomon now.
Yeah, I think that I don't know if you ever saw the documentary "The Gatekeepers." It was about the recent
Yes, it was on show. It was
Shinnet.
on Showtime. Yep. Hmm.
Yes, and I forget which one it was, but he remarked that all of us become liberals in the end, meaning all of us who fight um, this secret war to defend Israel in this neighborhood, and who sometimes do operations and assassinations and targeted killings, and who are on the front lines of this sometimes very dirty war. That in the end, they all become quite liberal in their approach, and they want to have do whatever they can to end this conflict and make peace in reasonable terms, obviously. And Gabriel certainly um, fell into that camp quite early. I mean, he is by no means an extremist or anything like that. What it has happened is that he's just become. I've lightened the series. I've lightened the tone. Placing him in Venice gives it just a wonderful um, look and feel and taste and smell to it. The food, the wine bars where they stop in the afternoon and have a little chichetti. It's just a delight to set the series there, or to base the character there, I guess is how I would describe it. He is hysterically funny. He is quite humorous. I mean, when you read the dialogue, every piece of dialogue, everything he said is just slightly off. He never responds directly to something. It's quite funny. It's a thriller. It is at the end of it. It is edge of your seat thriller. But along the way, it made me laugh out loud. And some of the responses I got from my broader reading community included lines like "snorted coffee out my nose" when at this line.
Yeah, no, listen,
like it's got a nice touch to it. And one of the things that Gabriel has done is he has collected villainous characters along the way and turned them into protagonists. That's the magic of the series. People who tried to kill him are now his friends. Thieves, criminals, art thieves, assassins, they are his friends and associates.
Yeah.
And I write them in that way. And that's the magic of the series.
Yeah, I mean, but that's also there's a metaphor for human nature. There's a metaphor for our relationships. Right. 80 short years ago, we were adversaries with Germany and Japan. They're our greatest allies today. We have this sort of thing going on in our lives as human beings. Let's go to Russia for a second. I want to get your thoughts on Russia, today's Russia, and somebody said to me, student of Russian literature, that the pain comes from the dislocation and the geography. And I just want to get you to react to this. What do they mean by the pain? All that pain in Russian literature, all the struggle of the Russian people, they're not quite in Europe. They're not quite in Asia. And so they always feel left out or as outsiders. And so they vacillate from morose insecurity to great overconfidence and arrogance. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something you believe, or did they have
first of all, I mean, if you start from the climate alone, okay?
Yep.
Brutal. A brief hot summer, a brief period where we're looking back in history, of course, where you would have fresh vegetables and I mean, it's a hard land. And then, of course, it was cut off from Europe and did not experience the Enlightenment, which therefore did not experience, an early exposure to democracy. I hate generalizations and sort of say, that Russians are by nature, patriarchal society, but I'm not sure that democracy, a true democracy, is it really a natural fit for the country? I hate to say that, and the criminality that goes on inside Russia today, as you know, is just astonishing. It's a criminal state. It's a mafia state run by the boss of bosses, but the gangs underneath him and everything. It's a mess. And at the same time, the level of brilliance, the music, the literature, it's a strange combination of incredible beauty and pain and sadness, and unfortunately just failure. They just can't get there.
Yeah.
And to
one of the richest countries in the world, though, right, Daniel? I mean, it's
in natural resources, mm-hmm. And that's part of the problem, that Putin has just become, the world's gas station, and they're going to mine and hack down their forests, and that's going to be their economy. I am alarmed by it. There was a great map that was on Fareed's show the other day, Fareed Zakaria, GPS. It showed it put the countries in red that are still trading with Russia, and it's all of Africa. It's a huge section of Central Asia, and I was wondering if get your thoughts on this. That are we, because of this war, reordering the global economy in any way?
Yeah, and there's no question. I mean, we've okay. The great irony of what we did there is we've actually hurt ourselves, and we've also we've repositioned the U.S. dollar. You have to be very, very careful. We benefit from the dollar being the reserve currency, but we made a decision 22 years ago to weaponize the dollar. And there's a great book called Treasury Wars, Daniel, where we use the dollar as a mechanism for sanctions, countries that we like, on the SWIFT system, the international banking system, countries that we dislike, we take these punitive measures towards. It's been a very effective political tool. And here's the problem with that tool, Daniel. Our politicians don't have to have any recourse. So our politicians no longer want to make decisions, right? They cede war powers to the president. The Congress doesn't like voting on those things. And so this is a mechanism by the administrative state where we can do things that politicians are no longer comfortable doing. We're watching the movie Oppenheimer this summer. And of course, Harry Truman has to make this decision to detonate literal death, create the sun on Earth, to wipe out 220,000 people. He makes that decision. We can debate that decision today, but he's making decisions. Our politicians are not doing that anymore. And so this is creating some havoc. And you know this intuitively. Anytime we make a decision like that, we're creating unnatural alliances. The Chinese and the Russians have a 1,600-mile border dispute. Okay, the Chinese still believe that there's a large swath of Siberia, which was taken from them by the Russian Empire in the 1630s, that belongs to them. And so these have been antagonists for several centuries. And yet, because of the decisions by the United States, we've put them into an alliance with each other. And so, we have to be careful about that. That's one of the things I did learn in my 11-day ill-fated stint. Any decision that's being made by the president comes with great ramifications. Yeah, great ramifications. So we all view in the U.S. the Bin Laden raid being a successful raid, but there were ramifications. Okay, we upset our relationship with Pakistan. We invaded a sovereign nation. We set an alarm bell off all over the Middle East. All of those tyrannies, they were super worried about potential invasions, but they were also worried about the conservatives saying, okay, you have to reject American policy and break your treaties with America. If you don't, they're coming for you, or they're coming for our country too. So there was lots of negative ramifications that came out of that, which you and I both know. But I want to get your opinion of this. So is there an optimistic outcome for the Ukrainian war? Is there an optimistic outcome for the Russians? Is this something that you and I, for our lifetimes, we're going to be plagued with this level of Cold War, hot war antagonism with the Russian people, many of which you and I both know, like you said, are kind people? I mean, we both know many Russians that we have a tremendous amount of respect for.
Look. One of the things that I talk about in the novel is what happens when Russia experiences a disastrous war or foreign policy adventure. Russo-Japanese War led to the first Russian Revolution of 1905. Collapse of the Russian army in World War I led to the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the Bolsheviks. And the murder of the Tsar and his family. Misadventure in Afghanistan led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Vladimir Putin knows his Russian history. He knows that if things go much worse, the percentages, 3/4 of the Russian military inside Ukraine right now, or something insane like that. Is it 200,000 casualties or 300,000 casualties? That the possibility of the fall of Putinism and regime change should not be off the table. And that is what I hope we're trying to achieve, to be honest with you. That's what I would be thinking about. I agree with Anne Applebaum. A lot of people are worried about, well, is the next person who takes over going to be worse than Putin? Anne Applebaum's thesis is no one is worse than Putin because he knows how to operate the levers of power so effectively. So I would like to see this end with the end of Putinism. And what I would really like to see is his butt in the dock at The Hague. But I think that's probably too much to hope.
Yeah, no, listen, I want to be optimistic, but I
am a Russian dissident. I'm going to say that I am a Russian dissident. I am a Russian pro-democracy activist. people always ask me, "Are you anti-Russian?" No, I am pro-Russian. I am for the Russian people. I would be on the front lines in Russia and against Putin. I have tried to, in all of the works, convey that I'm a pro-democracy advocate. I'm a human rights activist. I want the Russian people to have democracy. We've got to get rid of this guy. I hope that I maybe I'm crazy. I hope that is our unspoken policy goal. Is this to use this as an opportunity to move Putin off the stage.
Well, we were talking about Donald Trump in passing, but that's something that both of us would have to worry about because his
I mean,
right.
Putin.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that Donald Trump's repeated statement that he can end the war on day one of the second term. Well, what is it? What would that look like? Locking in the gains of Crimea and Eastern Ukraine, just go ahead and hand those over to the Russians. You can be sure that Vladimir Putin is trying to hang on in the hopes that Donald Trump gets back into office. And we should probably expect a great deal of Russian intervention in the next election.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be a great tragedy for us, obviously, if we had that situation unfold, and it would be a challenge to Western democracy. So, the one thing I always worry about with these criminal indictments with Donald Trump is that prison is very empowering for political figures. We know that, right? I mean, we know good examples and bad examples. The letters from the Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King Jr. would obviously be a good example.
We should not expect that from.
No, but we have bad examples.
There's another example. We don't need to.
Yeah, no, the Adolf Hitler in 1924.
Okay, you said it.
Exactly. No, we have good and bad examples of political imprisonment, but what we do know about political imprisonment is that it does lead to a galvanization of those groups. Whoever is supporting the good or bad political figure seems to galvanize around them. So we have to be worried about that.
Nelson Mandela is the one that is apart from Dr. King, Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, 27 years in prison, and he comes out to lead the country and do his best to unify that country. Of course, you write about South Africa in your book. We'll leave that plot line threaded there.
Okay.
Daniel, I want to ask you this because I've always been dying to ask you this. So I might as well ask you this on our podcast. When you think about the world, and the spycraft, and the seam between good and evil in the world, and the complexity, are you an optimist or a pessimist? A realist? How would you describe yourself, and how do you think about the future of the world?
We were talking about the climate a moment ago with my character. I don't know about you, but I'm alarmed by this summer. So I know we're having a sharp fluctuation because of the El Nino cycle, but it was 152 degrees apparent temperature, not actual temperature, in Tehran the other day. 152 degrees. Humans cannot live in that kind of climate. We are about to have a section of the earth in Pakistan, parts of India, that region that's going to back Iraq, going to be uninhabitable pretty soon. At least for large portions of the year. We're going to have millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people on the move pretty soon. We are losing cropland around the world to climate change. When you see, I'm very worried about the unraveling of democracy and democratic norms. I worry about competition for scarcity of resources, water. For one, I think the world's going to be more chaotic than it is even right now. That's what I would say. I try to portray my characters are professional spies and intelligence officers, and they're supposed to make these kinds of ruthless, hard decisions. But I'm also, as I said before, I believe in human rights, and I'm personally, left of center, and I worry about the world that we are on course for, and spies and intelligence officers have to prepare their countries and their leaders for the decisions that they're going to have to make, and we in the northern hemisphere are going to face some difficult decisions because of climate change. That's for sure.
Well,
and Israel. I mean, Gabriel lives in Venice now, but my goodness, it was, I guess that Prime Minister Netanyahu had to go into the hospital with a little bit of heat exhaustion or dehydration. Yeah. Israel's on fire with the temperature. The Mediterranean, this is going to create a lot of instability, I'm afraid.
Well, I mean, I want to throw one more thing at you, and I'll let you go in a second, but we both know what Dunbar's number is. It's why we have a difficulty maintaining more than 150 relationships. And the irony of our evolution is those relationships got us here. We were able to have these nice small villages, and the villages turned into city states. And then we had the administration of larger entities. But unfortunately, we can only really relate to about 150 people, at least according to Dunbar. So when you have a plastic cup or you have a plastic bottle and you're discarding it, you're not thinking about the 8 billion people and the impact that we're holistically having on each other. So is this feature of our evolution, which got us to where we are today, preventing us from dealing with the problems that we have?
Well, look, I mean, the statement that came out from China this week on climate was very revelatory, in my opinion. I mean, are they at 1.2, or I can't remember what their current population is? Okay, we have these people; they need electricity for this. We are not, going to make any drastic changes to our power grid and power consumption anytime soon. This is not going to be our decision. So. I am worried that there's just going to be they're trying to weave together an international coalition to take this on is going to be very difficult. We're talking about the heat. We need air conditioning. People aren't going to be able to survive without air conditioning. We need electricity to power the air conditioners. That we're not going to be able to marshal a broad coalition to get this done. It's going to fall on individuals and making decisions. That's where I'm at on this.
No, it's interesting,
and then we have to try to get as much into. We're going to have great electric cars soon. Try to drive less. Try to use less. Try to do everything you can with recycling. Do your bit. We're all going to be in this together.
Yeah, no, it's a.
By the way, we've gone from climate change. We're now in the climate crisis, and when we get to 1.5, which we're going to just blow past that 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial, we're going to go to a climate apocalypse, in my opinion. Well, let's leave on an up note.
Yeah, no, but I think it's important. I think it's important to at least discuss it because we have climate declinists, if you will. They don't believe in the climate change that's happening. You can't. It's irrefutable. I mean, if you look at the data, you look at the information, and you look at the admission, it's irrefutable. But I guess so. The reason I'm asking you these questions is that you're good at predicting things. And
isn't there a lot of money to be made in renewables and I mean,
yeah, well, I think that's ultimately
exactly
going to be the ticket. I've made investments on the blockchain where you're literally paying people to pick up plastic. Okay, and so you have companies that are producing plastic like Coca-Cola. They'll drop ship money into companies which will incentivize the youth of the world to get the plastic out of the ocean, to get the plastic off of the but we're just in that vexing dilemma that you're describing, because you need the air conditioning. The air conditioning emits carbon, so you're cooling off the inside while you're heating up the outside. So
you emit carbon by producing the electricity, but you're not actually you're taking the heat from inside the building and sticking it out on the street. Anyone who's walked along a New York street past an air conditioner knows you get that little blast of warm air, right? So you're making it actually hotter outside. So it is not a solution by any means, right. But it does keep people safe.
No, 100%. So we'll have to see how this happens. So, all right. So we're at the point in the podcast where I'm going to read you 5 words. And then you react to these 5 words. You can give me a sentence, a word, a paragraph. Okay. So let's start with the collector. The collector.
Well, I will say that it's a title that I wanted to use for a very long time, and I stayed away from it out of respect for John Fowles' book, and the way I just had to use it. And the way I dealt with it is the one of the quotes in the epigraph of the novel. It is just a perfect. It fits perfectly into the novel. So I gave a tip of the hat to one of my literary heroes, John Fowles, and I stole his great title.
Okay, America.
America. Incredibly blessed land with incredible people. Let's just take a deep breath. Let's stop this culture war. Let's stop this war of whipping up anger at elites and globalists and this nonsense. And let's heal our divisions. We are a great people.
Russia.
Find a way to extract yourself as quickly and as painlessly as possible from this situation and become a decent country.
Gabriel Allon.
One of my best friends. I love every minute I spend with him. I feel so blessed that I had the inspiration to create him, and I got a few more left in me.
Daniel Silva.
Work in progress. I guess that I can see that my career is heading towards an end at some point. I feel like I am so blessed and so lucky in that I was able to do what I always wanted to do from the time I was a young kid.
Well, listen, I think your best years are ahead of you. You got to think like Warren Buffett.
I hope so.
You've got your best years ahead of you. But listen, it's a phenomenal book. I'm looking forward to the next one already. With great sadness, I finished this book 2 days ago. I say with great sadness because I now have to wait 12 months for the next one. But the title of the book is The Collector by Daniel Silva. And it's just another amazing piece of literature. There's so much to learn from your writing and from your personal thoughts. So thank you today for joining us on Open Book.
Thank you so much for having me. What a wonderful.
Now on Open Book, Ben Smith, editor-in-chief of Semaphore, but he's also a former media columnist for the New York Times and founding editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed News. But he's now out with a best-selling book, Traffic, Genius, Rivalry, and Delusion in the billion-dollar race to go viral. So, Ben, you've had quite an illustrious career. If you were if you were on Wall Street, you would have been a partner in one of these big firms. Okay, you've done a lot of big jobs, Ben.
I know I
in
made some
media.
poor choices in my life, I guess.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. You're at the top of your game, but I'm impressed with the things that you've done and the way you think about the media. So let's just go right there. When you talk about going viral or traffic, when I'm an old guy, so that was like clicks and page views back in the day. But it's a little different now, right? It's a little bit of TikTok virality, Instagram virality, something catches favor, or a meme on Twitter and it goes in an explosive zone. Tell us about what traffic means to you. What did it mean and what does it mean today?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in this moment of real kind of weird change in really digital media entirely. And I think it's not totally clear what comes next. We're at sort of the end point of what were the huge drivers of traffic. Facebook, first of all, but Twitter was the driver of political kind of attention and conversation. And it's not like those things will turn off the lights tomorrow, but they were the centrally cultural relevant forces for a decade, and they're not anymore, and they're fading. I was at the New York Times as the media columnist, and I left BuzzFeed in 2020. Got to the Times and was just sort of like, what just happened? Like, what did we all just live through? And the book was my attempt to kind of go back to the origin story of this moment where we all became obsessed with traffic, and where people, particularly in the worlds I'm most familiar with, which are media and politics, sort of shifted toward this kind of new kind of connection to people on the internet.
So some people would accuse the media of going for the eyeballs and potentially slanting and creating more bias than the media that you and I grew up with, sort of that Columbia School of Journalism objectivity standard. Where do you think things really are? Because I don't want the tribal angle. I want the reality angle.
So I mean, everybody has always liked to complain about the media, and I bet if I talked to you in 2004, you wouldn't have said, "Wow, the media is perfect. I love how they all went to the Columbia School of Journalism." And to me, honestly, this book is more kind of a history, and the way I think about it is more history than kind of diagnosis. I mean, I think if you go back to the beginnings of this moment of thinking of this new generation of digital media, what you had were people who were incredible readers who hated what they were getting, right? Like you had a choice of a couple of newspapers, a couple of television networks that, conservatives felt like totally didn't represent them, that lots of people felt accurately had totally blown coverage of the Iraq War, the most important story of their generation, and who weren't on the internet, which is where we were all actually talking to each other by then. And so there was this, it wasn't like it came out of nowhere. There was this like popular interest in these new outsider voices that challenged this mainstream consensus. And they, I was part of that, like happily, had also had these new tools of measuring what people were interested in. And of course, journalists had always had the impulse to pander to their audience and to tell people what they want to hear. But suddenly you could really see it. Like you could know what people wanted to hear. And that was a big change. And in some cases, a very kind of, that led some people down a bad path.
I don't want to give away the book. The title of the book is Traffic, Genius, Rivalry, and the Delusion in the Billion-Dollar Race to Go Viral. But there's some fascinating vignettes in the book, and I'd like you to tease people with it if you don't mind. Let's go right back to Gawker and Nick Denton and the party that you opened the book with. Some people don't even know what Gawker is, Ben. So tell us a little bit about what Gawker is, set the scene for us, and tell us the significance of that vignette.
Yeah, I mean, in that early moment in 2003, say, different people are looking at this. Suddenly, you can kind of like see who's coming to your website and why, and think about what can you give them to make them come back more, and measure it. And one of the people, the pioneers of the space, a guy named Nick Denton, a former British journalist at the Daily Telegraph and the Financial Times, who when he looked at American media and sort of American culture, he just saw lots of hypocrisy of people who wrote these kind of polite, wooden sounding stories in the New York Times and then went to a bar and trashed the people that they were writing about. And I think his view was like, well, you should be writing what you actually think. Like journalism should be meaner and more honest and say what it says. And there were parts of this that honestly to me still feel really right. Like to me, actually one emblematic one. He kind of accidentally started a feminist blog called Jezebel. And the first thing they did was offer a $10,000 bounty for an unretouched photo of a celebrity in a fashion magazine. And sure enough, like somebody stole a picture from Redbook of Faith Hill, where she still had freckles and smile lines, which had gotten erased in the publication. And they published it, and it was kind of a sensation. And like, that was something that was probably good to get rid of in media in some way, not just obviously in women's magazines, but broadly this kind of photoshopping of reality. But there was also kind of a cruelty to it, a sense of like, well, look, if people just want pornography, we'll just show them pornography, and that's fine. And like a sort of eagerness, almost like a belief in playing to people's worst instincts. And Gawker, which began as kind of a media gossip blog, written by bright young women in New York who were fun writers and very plugged into the moment, and it was this very outsidery voice, gradually became more powerful, more important, more insidery, but kept that cruelty sometimes. And I think kind of became known for like what started to feel like bullying. And its worst was publishing, sex tapes without people's consent.
You see, it's fascinating. And after reading the book, I want to test a theory on you, get your reaction to it. So the media really was the first big movement in decentralization. Once the internet exploded, you had the arrival of Drudge. You yourself were at Politico. You then went over to BuzzFeed, become one of the founders there. And all of a sudden, you didn't need the printing press. You didn't need the papers dropped off and that whole distribution mechanism. You had this sort of viral, decentralized distribution mechanism for your property, if you will, your intellectual property.
Yeah.
I guess some cruelty came with that, though, didn't there, or did there not? And if there did, what was that from? Is that a lack of editor-in-chief saying, whoa, that's too nasty, or not objective enough? Or what do you think it was? First of all, am I right on that? And if I'm not right on that,
your basic read that there were, people talk about gatekeepers in media, but like they had gates. Like you owned a printing press, or you owned or you had access to a broadcast tower, and most people didn't. And if you didn't have those things, like that was a gate. It was a real gate. Like gatekeeper, it wasn't kind of a sort of metaphorical, there are gatekeepers in society thing. It was like, well, if you don't have access to a printing press or a broadcast tower, you can't send your message widely. And that really changed. And there were these new people. Nick Denton was one of them. Jonah Peretti, the founder of BuzzFeed, was another, who had kind of like really, who had ideas about what people would want in this new space. And for Denton, it was this kind of, rawness and unreserved exposure, which often was cruel. Peretti, who I worked for at BuzzFeed, had this totally different point of view that in some ways was accurate, in other ways totally diluted, which was that he was the first to really see the social internet coming, the Facebooks and the Twitters, in the sense that the main way that your content will be distributed is somebody will share it with a friend, somebody will share it on a social platform, and you've got to be thinking, what will people share? And his initial theory was people will share things that make them look good to their friends. They'll share appeals for earthquake relief. They'll share cute memes and cat pictures and funny jokes. They'll share like kind of thoughtful articles. They'll share new news. That's what he hired me to get. But they would certainly not go on these platforms and scream about politics, because like, who wants to be that person? Who wants to look to their friends like some maniac yelling about divisive politics all the time? I mean, that obviously turned out to be a massive mistake. And that was all people wanted to use these platforms for.
Yeah, no, listen, I mean, I find the whole thing fascinating. Obviously, I'm a media aficionado.
Well, you're now a media participant.
I spent a lot of time consuming the media. I spend some time getting attacked by the media. It's all good. I'm a big proponent of free speech, and so people can write whatever they want. And people are upset with me right now because I see no problem with CNN bringing on Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump. I certainly don't want him to be president. But let me tell you, he's the leading Republican figure, and he's a congenital liar. But he's going to be part of the mix in 2024. And we're a free speech society, so we have to sort of live with these things. I just want to ask you about mythology, if you don't mind. If I say Arianna Huffington, we see sort of a left-wing rival to Matthew Drudge and the Drudge Report. But if I say Andrew Breitbart, because of his death, I think it means different things to different people. You knew Andrew personally. I had a relationship with him as well. I don't see him the way he is lionized today, but I'm just curious of what your reaction is. Has he been mythologized in any way? Who was Andrew
Yeah.
Breitbart for the young people that may not know him or know him personally?
He was, I mean, I think maybe it's in some ways more interesting to start with the myth, which is I think he's now seen as the father of contemporary conservative media. He had kind of an appetite for confrontation and a belief that politics starts in culture and in fights over high, kind of divisive cultural subjects, which may sound a little familiar to people. And people who can, he, there was, when he died, I think it was in 2012, I believe, the people around him included Steve Bannon, who took over Breitbart, pulled it into this very kind of divisive and political direct support, full-on support for Donald Trump. It included Ben Shapiro, who went into this a direction that maybe was more about fighting the culture wars and producing something that connected with young people and young conservatives, but lots of people came out of his orbit, all of whom kind of fight, I think in some ways try to claim his legacy and say what it was. I mean, he was this very complicated, difficult guy who had this strange experience he was in Hollywood and kind of a misfit in Hollywood because he was a conservative, and got really addicted to this like early internet conversation on these message boards where this guy named Matt Drudge was sending around an email of updates of like anti-Clinton theories and stuff. And he was obsessed with Drudge, who was in many ways like a real breakthrough in the sort of tension between this wide open digital media and this sort of closed off traditional media. And he broke out when he heard that Newsweek was working on this story about Monica Lewinsky. And as Newsweek is deliberating about publishing it, Drudge just publishes it. And pretty soon after that, Andrew goes to work for him kind of as this anonymous minion. Like he's getting paid kind of irregularly, like whenever Drudge feels like sending him a check. He's, he has all this power of, having access for like 6 hours a day to the most important political platform in the country, but nobody knows who he is except for like occasional journalists like me who cotton onto it and start sending him links to our stories. And there was this moment I guess when was the Janet Jackson Super Bowl wardrobe malfunction?
Super Bowl,
wardrobe malfunction. Somebody told me they were at a party with him, and he, and he's there like programming the national conversation on this crazy thing that just happened. The language he's using on the Drudge Report is immediately on television, but no one at this party knows who the hell he is. And he tried to get out from Drudge's shadow in various ways. He co-founded Huffington Post with Ariana, which was meant to be a left-wing Drudge Report. He then founded Breitbart.com, which at first was trying to sort of siphon traffic and money off of the Drudge Report. It was a sort of a side hustle that Drudge granted him. And then eventually launched a set of blogs which were modeled on Gawker, on Nick Denton's Gawker, both in their structure and in that their big scoop was, a picture of Anthony Weiner's genitals, which was a very Gawker-y thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I remember that well, and I got the date wrong. I said 2007. It's a sign of old age, Ben. It was the 2004 January Super Bowl. Right. She was with Justin Timberlake, and obviously she had her famous wardrobe malfunction. So as crazy as that sounds, almost 20 years ago now, which seems like it was yesterday. But I had met Andrew at a David Koch conference. Now, the Kochs have also been mythologized, but back then, and just so everybody's clear, who paid tribute to Andrew Breitbart at his funeral, it would have included the likes of Mitt Romney, who is now a supposed rhino, but back then was sort of in the bell curve of conservatism. Of course, the Kochs now have been demonized, but I would have thought of them in 2009, 10, and 11 as more in the bell curve of conservatism. Yeah. And so here's the optimal question for you. Has the media contributed to spinning things out, or were things spinning out of control anyway? Or was the segmentation and the decentralization that you describe in your book creating the political environment, or vice versa? Or how are they harmonious with each other?
Yes. Is that the right answer to that question?
Maybe yes.
Yeah, I think basically
it had something to do with it, right?
Of course. And I think, I mean, you of all people, I think, kind of understand the extent to which these lines that people imagine between, there's this thing called politics, there's this thing called technology, there's something called business, there's something else called the media. Like those are fake lines. That's not how power works. That's not, and in fact, these things flow into each other very naturally, and they're effect, and the same trends run through all of them. And like in, and I think that's really what, when you sort of step back and look at the story of the sort of period that I wrote about, it's, you know, these deep changes in, particularly in digital media, but also in society, this collapse in trust in institutions that isn't just media institutions, rise in kind of individual voices, whether it's, you know, whether, and you know, and the institutions that are being replaced by individuals include the media, they include the Republican Party, where Donald Trump is more important than the party. And all these trends sort of run together, and I think are really amplified in that kind of 2015 to 2017 period, in particular, by decisions made technically at the social platforms, Facebook in particular, that they're seeing this rise in what they see as engagement. And from their perspective, you know, they want you spending 4 minutes on their site. They think that they can get you to spend 4 minutes and 30 seconds a day if they make some tweaks. Like, they're not thinking we want to elect some kind of politician or other. But what they do is provide this very rich platform for essentially, you know, for something that is very well suited to right-wing populism, to this kind of confrontational, provocative stuff where, like, if whether I like it or I hate it, I'm like, I want to write a comment and say fuck you, or say this is great, and the system then sees, wow, this guy is really engaged, let's show him more like that. And I think, you know, I think there were a lot of forces in society that, and real things people were angry about, driving it too. And cable news is, you know, part of this system too. It's not like there's some one factor, but certainly this all played out on social media. And actually, one of the big ironies, like, because, you know, I spent a lot of time in the book covering these new digital sites, notably the Huffington Post, that had sprung up to help Democrats, and that were that were progressive, and that saw the internet as, like, obviously is for young people and Democrats and progressives. And the election of Barack Obama is very naturally the culmination of the new media. I think that's how people saw it in the aughts. And in 2011, Obama went to visit Facebook. And he kind of went without saying, like, oh, Facebook's a democratic institution. It's where college kids are. It's like visiting a campus. You know, and I think that was just this huge misunderstanding of what digital media was going to do. And in fact, the sort of politician who used it best, the movement that used it best, was Trump.
Well, let me say this, and I want to get test you. I mean, I think because you have such insight into this and you're so real and honest about it. Are we at a point in time, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, could even be 50 years ago, David Halberstam wrote the book, The Powers That Be. There's just this great book about centralized media. I think he had Henry Luce in the book and Bill Paley, and there was centralized media, and there was, frankly, some coordination with the American politicians. As an example, you know, Franklin Roosevelt, they never showed him in the wheelchair. Sort of, that was okay. Jack Kennedy had his share of adulterous affairs. They sort of left that in a quote unquote lockbox somewhere. That era obviously is gone, never to come back. But I guess what I'm wondering is the era of our national unity also gone, because when you had the centralized media, and that was a centralized light beam into everybody's home, there was more of a unifying message. You know, we sometimes say to each other, wow, we can't even debate anymore because I'm getting my facts from Fox News. You may be getting your facts from MSNBC or vice versa. And so now we don't even have the same facts when we come to the debate stage. Am I right about this? Am I wrong about this? Is there a cure for this, or what is the outcome, and how do you think it affects our national unity and our current tribalism?
That's a good question. I mean, I do think that that era that's gone, that people remember more fondly than honestly they experienced it. Lots of people, including like conservatives and people who cared about civil rights and lots of others, felt like totally shut out by that sort of shared facts zone, and those shared facts weren't always facts. But I do think that era is over. But I think the era we all just lived through is over too, where you have this unbelievably divisive landscape all playing out on Facebook and on Twitter and on one platform, and we're headed into something more splintered, but maybe a little less divisive and shouty too. I think podcasts like this are part of it. People are finding voices they connect with and trust, and looking for help synthesizing all the chaos out there, rather than wanting just
listen,
to immerse themselves and swim in the chaos. I mean, that's, I started this new thing Semaphore, and that's how we're thinking about it a lot.
I was just going to say that I think Semaphore represents that, because let's go there for a second. What does Semaphore represent? I find the writing in Semaphore, you guys seem to be first to the news. Give you a lot of credit on scooping, but I think you're also laying it out there fairly objectively. Am I getting it wrong, or are you coming at it from a slant that I'm not totally getting? And I think I'm pretty good at reading the slant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. I mean, I hope. Yes, I mean, it's Semaphore. I mean, I think our goal. I mean, I don't think anybody buys that like we can create a new class of news robots who just tell you the facts as they are with no perspective. And so I think what we're trying to do is say, we're reporters who know what we're talking about, but and we can get, we can break news, we can tell you things you didn't know, and we'll also tell you what we think about that, what we think it means, that we think Scaramucci totally screwed this thing up. But also we want to recognize we could be wrong about that. We're not going to be wrong about the facts. But
well, I mean, enough people have written that about me. I don't think you guys need to.
And if somebody else thinks you did a fabulous job, we're going to go out of our way to find somebody who disagrees with us and include their voice too. And if there's perspectives from other countries, from other angles, we're going to try to sort of pull all that stuff together. Because I think part of the experience of reading the news now is thinking what isn't this publication telling me? This all seems too simple. What's the alternate point of view? And then you read something in the New York Times and you go out and Google the same story to read it a few other places and try to triangulate what's going on. And I think our sort of perspective is we want to help you do that rather than try to feed you a kind of simpler story or simpler perspective.
I think it's very, very fair. I want to go to the subtitle of this book. It's Genius, Rivalry, and the Delusion in the billion-dollar race to go viral. So I want to go to delusion first, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then we'll go to rivalry and genius, but let's focus on delusion. Who are the most deluded?
I mean, I think that the people, Jonah Peretti, Nick Denton, me, everybody who thought that we could kind of ride this tiger, and both that we could exercise some level of control over it, but also that the people running these big platforms, Mark Zuckerberg in particular, would ultimately want to align them with professional journalism and professional entertainment, that it was going to be in their interest to, the way the cable operators, created an environment where CNN and ESPN and MTV could thrive, that these new social platforms would ultimately need to create an environment where journalism could thrive, among other things. Just wasn't true. That was a mistake. I don't know if it was it was a delusion or just wrong, but that was a huge error. And that's why I think you look around, you see Vice, you see BuzzFeed, you see all these places really struggling.
I think what makes something a delusion is that you have some certainty, or you at least have some belief that it's going to go a certain way when the facts represent otherwise. I mean, there was delusion on the Trump campaign in 2016 about the ability to control the president, who was going to control him. I had dinner. I went with General Kelly to the Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation dinner 2 weekends ago. And we were obviously reminiscing about my firing, but we were also reminiscing about the Trump administration and how difficult it was, but how we were all delusional. Okay, so delusion is an interesting word. We can get things wrong, and sometimes we get it wrong not because the facts are wrong, but because of our prism in terms of looking at the facts. We have a tendency to want to alter it to fit a truth that we may believe. I guess where I'm going from in that, Ben, what is the thing that you all were guided to? What you thought you were going to be the next Time magazine virtually? You thought what was the vision at the time?
I mean, it really was the idea that just as the advent of printing had created this whole profusion of newspapers that hadn't existed before, of the certain kind of mass ability to print, and and particularly though cable. Just to dwell on that and go back to it, because it's hard to understand how people were thinking, particularly like what were investors who put hundreds of millions of dollars into new media thinking? Like, how do you explain that? And the actual answer is cable. People laid wires in the ground, and they thought, and they needed all this content to fill those new pipes, and they hired MTV and ESPN to do that, and they built huge businesses and made enormous amounts of money. And I think people who were investing in that space, that was fundamentally what they thought was going to happen, that these were new permanent pipes for the transmission of information, Facebook and Twitter and Snap and Pinterest and whatever. And
I think it's fascinating. I think it makes your book your book is great, even for people that are not interested in journalism, just interested in business and the current zeitgeist. The book is phenomenal. We're running out of time here. I want to go to my 5 words. So every one of my authors gets 5 words, Ben, and then you need to react to those 5 words, sort of like the Malcolm Gladwell blink sort of a thing.
All right.
I say the word and then you say blank. Ready?
All right.
Let's start. BuzzFeed.
Viral. Are we we're free associating here, or should I talk for a while?
Yeah, no, free associating. Yeah, viral, right? Viral is what you
Sure.
think. I say BuzzFeed, you say viral.
Okay.
How about Vice? I say Vice, you say what?
Brand. Very pure brand.
Okay. Facebook.
Out of fashion.
Okay, so Facebook has jumped the shark. What about Semaphore?
Please sign up.
All right, that could be your best one. Okay, I gotta go to one subject, which is a thorny one for me, and less so probably for you. But let's go to Sam Bankman-Fried. I say Sam Bankman-Fried. You say what? I'll tell you what I say. I say betrayal. I mean, that's my one word. But what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that way too. I mean, I didn't have the kind of he invested in our company and I didn't have the kind of complicated relationship or exposure that you guys did. But also, yeah, I mean, he really presented himself as something he wasn't.
Yeah, which
and obviously created huge headaches for all his business partners.
Gonna happen. Okay, in our last 30 seconds, I don't know anything about the media. I'm in the bookstore on Amazon. I see the title Traffic, Genius, Rivalry, and Delusion in the $1 billion race to go viral. I'm buying the book because why, Ben Smith?
Because it tells you how we got here.
I think that's it. I mean, it's an excellent examination of the social zeitgeist, and it'll get you right up to speed on where we are and potentially where we're going. You wrote a phenomenal book. I wish you great success with it. And thank you for joining us today on Open Book.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was really fun.